Hi, I am Tony Russo from On Deathcare, and this is The Rest, your weekly rundown of news from around funeral service. This week, there's some cool stuff coming out of Parting Stone as well as out of some of the Consolidators. I'm going to run down some of the stories that I covered last week involving different personnel moves, I guess, is the best way to talk about it. And of course, other things that I have picked up as I scour the internet for funeral industry news that I think might interest you. As always, I'd like to thank my paid subscribers for making all of this possible. We picked up several this week, and I definitely want to thank you guys again. It's been really fulfilling to have people step up to say, yes, this is the kind of thing that we would like to see more of. But whether you can subscribe for free or whether you would like to pay, please consider subscribing to On Deathcare. You can go to ondeathcare.com where you can just hit the subscribe button, and there'll be a bunch of different levels at which you can support us. And that level starts at 0 and moves to more than 0. But anyway, you can check that out at ondeathcare.com. All right, let's get into it. First up, our friend Unique Green is back in the news. Now, if you've been following my podcasts, I started doing this when I was doing a different podcast for a different company altogether. The Texas Funeral Service Commission is a holy mess. I'm working on a long-form kind of story that traces it from its beginning to where we are now, but I don't even believe this is the end. But Unique Green was already arrested for crimes committed under other circumstances, but the crimes she committed involved getting illegal documents from the Texas Funeral Service Commission, and as a result, there is speculation that the powers that be decided to pop her free because they knew she'd commit another crime, I guess, and instead develop a longer game prosecution approach to what's been going on in Texas. I do not know if that's true or not. I honestly think a lot of the bad actors in the Texas Funeral Service Commission are just going to be, forced to live very comfortable lives with no feedback or no blowback, for the countless families that they have cheated and made uncomfortable, and many of who had their grief undermined, their grieving period undermined by the lack of care or interest from the Texas Funeral Service Commission, and honestly, funeral service in Texas writ large. I think everybody's very happy to not have anybody in charge, and sometimes you have to pay the price, and sometimes the price is lost bodies and swindled families. In this case, they were able to arrest Unique Green for stealing money from a 78-year-old man, Lawrence Gamnon. She used his personal details, which she got as a pretend funeral director with credentials she got from the Texas Funeral Service Commission, to swindle his estate out of $2.2 million. Now, since the Texas Funeral Commission was not involved, this is a crime that is going to be prosecuted. There's been a lot of coverage and a lot of talk about how can she do this. And again, I have to reiterate, she was already arrested for way more heinous crimes that didn't involve taking money from one specific rich old man, but instead from swindling dozens of poor families. And there won't be, I don't think, any comeuppance for her when it comes to that. But if she goes to jail over this $2.2 million flim-flam scheme of hers, that is fine. Again, there'll be a link to this story in the show notes, and look for this fall something longer and more substantive from me that hopefully ties many, if not most, of these strings together. There has been another theft of bronze vases, this time in Hillsboro, Oregon. It's a crime I feel like I'm reporting on a lot here, and I wonder, how common it is. So I covered, agriculture for a long time, and there was a real problem with copper wire being stolen from farms. And that was for, using it for meth. And it was easy to recycle because it was just copper wire and anybody can kind of get it from anywhere and they can move it around. These things seem like they'd be harder to get anyone to recycle, especially given that they're clearly, they're clearly from cemeteries. So I wonder what precisely the end game here is. Are these really just, kids or very, very low level criminals, or is there something larger that I'm missing about stealing all these vases? So whichever you call them, vases or vases, and if you have any other information about what kind of leads to this, I would love to know. Please shoot me an email. You can do that at bytonyrusso@gmail.com, or you can reply to the email that this newsletter came on. As you know, I am always interested in earned media, and this week there was a doozy. Parting Stone, which is a company that turns cremated remains into solidified stones, wasn't quite featured. I don't even think they were name checked, but it is still a really, really nice. It was an advertisement for memorialization, if nothing else. An elementary school principal, his name is Chad Riddle, brought one of the parting stones from his recently deceased wife with him onto the television show American Ninja Warrior. I guess he was competing in the championship or some sort of a special elimination round, and he handed the stone to his son before he performed. And you can watch the video. There is a link to the video in the show notes, and I'm ambivalent. Reality television in general just ruins the notion of genuine human emotion and genuine human action. If you've been involved with anything like this, you know that how elaborately staged it can be. But at the bottom of it, I don't think it matters. At the bottom of it, this is a demonstration of why this kind of memorialization is a good kind of memorialization and can be helpful and healthful and healthy. There you go. So take a look at the video. You can tell me what you think of it for yourself. Congratulations to Parting Stone. I mean, especially if they're not involved in setting this up. They're just, got a good bounce from providing a good product. And whether or not the television is amplifying the emotions, the notion is real. The notion of here's something that you can cling on from your departed loved one is something that's meaningful, whether or not television made it gross. So anyway, link in the show notes. Cason Newberry has acquired the Rhodes Funeral Home in Karnes City and Oak Park Memorial Funeral Chapel in Beeville. Those are all in Texas. He had a long process where he was trying to get the acquisition done, but he was finally able to coordinate it, and they will undergo name changes, and he'll rebrand them to Newberry Funeral Home and try to continue as normal. I've actually reached out to him. We'll see if we can speak with him about the different trials and tribulations that he had getting the acquisitions done and why a young person would buy two funeral homes at the same time in this particular place. So, but there's a link to the announcement anyway in the show notes. I wanted to share it with you. Milestone Funeral Partners has appointed Lang Holt as its new chief financial officer. Things are moving very fast over at Milestone Funeral Partners. It'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out. We reported on a transition last week, and this is another one. When we talk about Milestone, the thing that I continue to talk about is, as I understand it, their idea is to try and free up the funeral directors to do more funeral directee type things. And they're starting to bring in more people at the top who are more financially minded than from funeral service anyway. But Mike Martell is still, kind of running things there, and he and his partner are funeral directors, and I think that they're hoping to keep it funeral director friendly. Between them and the Heritage family, which I talked about in last week's podcast, and we actually did a podcast, I'm really interested to see what future consolidation looks like. This notion of focusing hard on the tradition part and kind of demonstrating it rather than just saying it is we'll have to see how it shakes out. I think, as we'll talk about in the next story, there may be way more trouble at Foundation Partners than has been alluded to. And one wonders how people are managing on the ground. And this move, which I hope to report on more next week, um, suggests that there is some sort of financial shift going on, and how it can shake out to keep it still without losing the service to the families is, I think, going to be the biggest question. For the reason is a question for consolidators is because their name isn't necessarily on it. But I have to say, I'm going to be quoting Lindsey Granson, who is the COO of Heritage Family, for quite some time. And she said, why don't we just say, yes, we're a corporation, but we're also a good one? And I don't know if that was just to tickle my ears or if that's something they really believe over there that will shake out over time. But there is increasingly, we'll talk about it in just a second, the absolute vitriol that there is out there for Foundation Partners can't be overstated. And you have to care about your reputation. And when you don't, it's okay. It just makes everybody else a lot angrier. But anyway, so congratulations to Lang, and we'll see how things go with that. And there's a link to the press release anyway in the show notes. I got a text message this week from my brother's sister-in-law, who is no longer a funeral director, but was until recently. And she worked for Foundation Partners. She was not part of the most recent firing. She had left a while ago. But what I thought was cool, the reason she reached out to me was that she was looking to see if there was any reporting at all on the recent, bloodletting there at Foundation Partners. And mine was the only story out there. So she reached out and she said, among other things, that I was too kind to the memory of John D. Smith, who is apparently incredibly unpopular. I do not know how the new regime is faring, but so far I've continued to get a lot of disgruntled present and former employees who just want to pile on. And I think that's the difference. And that's what I had mentioned earlier. Like, when your employees hate you and they're glad when something bad happens to the company, that's all you need to know about whether or not you're doing a good job. The best companies in the world treat their employees very well. Not the most valuable companies, I guess, but the best companies. Like, I'm thinking of Costco, for example, right? Costco is one of these massive companies that has massive profits, and also, their employees can feed their children and see them occasionally. So there is that balance where if people are happy, they're going to work harder. If they're miserable in their job and they'll have a job that's already like this, a high stress one, when things go poorly, they go very, very poorly. So we'll see. I have some more appointments to talk with Foundation Partners Group employees and former employees over the next 2 or 3 days. And hopefully I'll be able to give you a better sense of I don't know if there is a better sense. These are unhappy people And they have been for quite some time. And as I said, my sister-in-law has not been, well, my brother's sister-in-law has not been with the company recently. Anyway, there's no link to this in the show notes. It was just a piece of information that I wanted to share with you. A couple weeks ago, Earth Funeral announced that it had the largest human composting facility in the world when it opened its new place in Maryland. And this week, word came out that it was looking into Charlotte, North Carolina for its next stop. Earth Funeral said Charlotte is one of several cities they're considering expanding into. Right now, they have operational facilities in Washington and Nevada and Maryland. And they have something in in California from back before California decided that when it legalized human composting, it was going to give it a 3-year waiting period to put the regulations together. So one expects as soon as 2027 opens up, they'll probably have something there. My concern, and I shot them an email asking them about this, is the money. They are spending an awful lot of money. They have one official raise of $10 million, as far as I can tell. The next raise that they had isn't something I've been able to put my finger on, but they also said that opening Maryland cost $10 million. So they've got a bunch of money out, and they're going to need a bunch more if they're going to be spending $10 million per new facility. They've only cremated about 12,000 people over the last 3 years, and most of them were probably in Washington because Nevada just opened up a year and a half ago, and Maryland only opened up a month ago. So it remains to be seen. I am concerned. I'm always concerned when companies look like they're over leveraged, because I know what happens when you have more bills than you have money. Sometimes you don't always make the best decisions. But again, they reiterated that they have the most patient investors in the world. I believe everyone has the most patient investors in the world until the investors want their money back. Then they tend to be less patient. So we'll see what happens with Earth as it continues to grow. It'll be an interesting example of whether or not things can be scalable. The Natural Funeral a couple weeks ago announced that they had made some more sales in Georgia, and I hope to have something on that either next week or the week after. We're having some scheduling difficulties, with the Natural Funeral, but they sell individual vessels. So the investment is a little bit smaller, and the way in is a little bit more narrow. But one of the things, and I've spoken with everyone about this who has a funeral company, a terramation company, and they all say that you have to start scalable. And I'm wondering really, though, if that is the case. And that's what I'm hoping to talk about with Natural Funeral, because if I offer, natural organic reduction, and I have 3 vessels instead of the recommended 10 to 12, and the 4th person comes in, I can still, ship them to someplace that does it. I mean, it's still a possibility for me, just as if there wasn't enough, if you're running very busy in your cremation, in your crematory, you can, outsource some of your cremation work. I expect that that's going to be some of what can be going on with natural organic reduction. And again, I hope to talk more about that in the next 2 weeks. But there's an article, a link, to my Earth Funeral article in the show notes. And that will do it for this time. The rest has been an On Deathcare production. It was written, edited, videoed, transmogrified. Anything that was done to it was done by me, and I had a blast doing it. I continue to genuinely enjoy covering this industry and am very, very grateful for everyone who's chipping in to help me keep the ship kind of chugging forward. So thank you so much again to all of my paid subscribers, but all of my subscribers one way or the other. I genuinely appreciate all subscriptions, and you can subscribe at ondeathcare.com. You can also subscribe to Just the Podcast wherever you're listening now, which could be on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. You can just hit that little bell and get notifications when the Rest podcast comes out, and some of the other podcasts too. Or, as I said, subscribe to On Deathcare. I'll send you everything, and that way you can decide what you want to look at without having to know to go and look at it. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, if you have anything you would like me to cover, if you have any comments, I would love to hear them. You can reach me by responding to the email you got. You can make notes in the comments, or you can just shoot me an email at my email address, which is bytonyrusso@gmail.com. That is bytonyrusso@gmail.com. And that will do us for this week, and we will see you next time.